Welcome to the Deep Dive. You, our listener, have sent us a truly fascinating collection of articles, notes, and research, all centered around this idea you've called coping strings, basically, how we all navigate the inevitable challenges life throws our way.
Yeah, it's a really rich mix. It pulls from psychology, history, culture, biology, philosophy. Even AI comes into it.
It really does, and speaks to just how multifaceted, being human and dealing with adversity actually is.
What's interesting right away is how well your term, coping strings, captures something psychologists have been looking at for ages.
Right. So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack these coping strings. We want to explore what they are, how they've maybe evolved, how they differ across cultures.
And what the future might hold, especially with AI getting smarter.
Exactly. Think of this as your shortcut, to getting a really well-rounded understanding of this incredibly relevant topic. We know you like getting to the heart of things quickly but thoroughly.
Yeah, so we've tried to distill the key nuggets from all these sources you sent. The goal is to give you that clarity, that kind of aha moment, without being overwhelming. Just a clear, engaging overview.
Okay, so let's dive right in. This idea of coping strings. What struck me immediately was how closely it seems to align with coping mechanisms in psychology.
That's a brilliant connection. It really is. Your coping strings phrase, it kind of nails the essence of what psychologists call coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
These are basically the ways, sometimes conscious, sometimes not, that we adjust to manage stressful situations, how we handle that tension and anxiety.
And it's not just about getting through it, right?
Yeah.
It's also about how we bounce back, maybe even grow from it.
Exactly. That's where resilience comes in. Coping strings definitely includes resilience.
Right.
And resilience isn't just snapping back. It's more of a dynamic process, adapting well to adversity, to trauma, stress. And yeah, it can lead to personal growth. It's not some fixed trait.
It's amazing how many angles there are. Psychology, obviously, but the sources mention history, culture, biology, philosophy. It feels like it touches everything.
You've hit on a crucial point there. You really need that interdisciplinary lens to grasp it fully. Psychology gives us frameworks. History shows us change over time. Culture shows diversity. Biology gives the raw mechanics of stress response.
And philosophy asks about the meaning of it all.
Exactly. Even things like physics, math, logic, they become relevant when you start thinking about how AI might understand or even help with coping.
And the strings part of the name is so fitting, isn't it? It implies not just one reaction, but a whole set we can draw on, flexible.
Absolutely. Strings perfectly captures that idea of a flexible, adaptable repertoire, like a toolkit,
Yeah, a toolkit of reactions.
And often successful coping isn't about having one magic bullet, but having that diverse toolkit ready.
You even mentioned, our listener, things like vitamins and nutrition as maybe some of the earliest coping strings. It makes sense. That fundamental drive to survive, to feel better.
That's a remarkably insightful connection. Linking basic needs like nutrition back to early coping really highlights that core human drive to, alleviate suffering and live longer. It shows the historical continuity. Even just finding food to stop being hungry, that's a fundamental way of coping with a basic stressor.
So, shifting gears a bit.
Yeah.
You also had some really interesting questions about how humans understand emotions and coping compared to how AI might. It's different, right? We feel things.
It raises a really important difference, yeah. Human understanding is rooted in subjective experience.
Yeah.
It's shaped by our biology, psychology, social interactions. We feel emotions.
Right.
We interpret them based on our history, our culture. Coping for us is so tied up with managing those internal feelings.
The reason behind an emotion isn't always straightforward for us. Is AI getting closer to understanding that purpose behind things?
That's the complex part. Human intentionality, those layers of meaning, AI is still, really just beginning to even try and grasp at.
So it can recognize patterns, like see a sad face.
Yes, AI can be trained on massive data sets to recognize patterns, emotions, and faces, voices, text, but it doesn't have the internal felt experience we do. It doesn't feel sad.
So when an AI offers support, it's pattern matching, not empathy.
Essentially, yes. It recognizes patterns correlated with stress or patterns humans have labeled as effective coping. It can simulate support based on that data.
Okay.
But the purpose behind its actions comes from its programming, from human understanding. It lacks subjective feelings, inherent intent.
You also asked about AI maybe being designed to feel good all the time. That sounds unlikely.
Well, yeah, that really highlights the difference. AI can be optimized for outcomes, maybe reducing user distress based on its metrics.
But it doesn't feel good.
No, not in the human sense. It doesn't have subjective feelings or consciousness. It runs on algorithms aiming for programmed goals.
But even with those differences, AI could still be a powerful tool for understanding our coping, right?
Oh, absolutely. The potential for synergy is huge. AI can analyze vast amounts of data on human coping, spot strategies we might miss.
And maybe personalized recommendations.
Exactly. Based on individual needs and patterns, it can see large-scale patterns our individual minds just can't process.
Let's step back in time. You mentioned basic survival, like food, being early coping. Makes sense.
Definitely. Early coping was very direct. Food, shelter, and crucially, social support in those early groups, dealing with immediate, tangible threats.
And then, as societies got more complex, our understanding changed too. We started thinking about the internal stuff, like Freud's defense mechanisms.
Exactly. The early 20th century, with psychology developing, was a big shift. Freud gave us a framework for those more internal psychological ways we handle stress, beyond just basic survival.
And since Freud, we've added more layers, like cognitive psychology focusing on our thoughts.
Absolutely. Cognitive psychology brought in the role of conscious thought processes, problem solving, how we interpret events. That was huge.
And social support, too. We realized how vital that is.
Massively important. Recognizing the power of social support has been a major development. Strong networks buffer stress, improve health. It's consistently shown.
The sources also talk about different ways to categorize coping, like problem-focused versus emotion-focused.
Yes. Models like Folkman and Lazarus's have been really influential. Problem-focused is tackling the problem head-on.
Right.
Emotion-focused is managing the feelings that come with the stressor. And these models have expanded, to include seeking support, finding meaning.
So it's like that toolkit again. Different tools for different jobs.
Precisely. Flexibility is key. Using different approaches as needed is usually the most effective path.
And Lazarus's transactional model that emphasizes the back and forth between us and our environment.
Yes, that's so important. Stress isn't just something that happens to us. It's this interaction.
How we see it,
Yeah.
how we judge our ability to handle it.
Exactly. Our perception, our appraisal of the situation, and our own resources, that plays a huge role in the stress we actually experience and how we respond.
You also mentioned how big historical successes changed life's order. It makes you think how major shifts, agriculture, industrial revolution, the digital age now,
Oh, definitely.
must have created whole new stressors, needing new coping methods.
That's a profound point. Each major shift brought new challenges. Agriculture meant new social structures, resource issues. The Industrial Revolution brought factory stress, urban living stress.
And now?
Well, think about wars, pandemics recently, the pace of tech change. They all demand new forms of individual and collective coping and resilience. We're constantly adapting.
It's not just history, though. Culture plays a huge role, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where you grow up really shapes how you cope. It's not one size fits all.
Absolutely not. Coping is deeply woven into cultural norms and values. What's seen as okay or even effective varies dramatically.
Yeah.
Culture shapes how we even perceive stress in the first place.
And we see big differences, like between individualistic cultures, maybe more focus on self-reliance, fixing the problem yourself.
Right. Personal goals, direct communication, maybe seeking professional help is more common.
Versus collectivist cultures, where it might be more about group harmony, leaning on family and community.
Exactly. Maintaining group harmony is often paramount. Seeking support within the community network is key, and maybe there's more emphasis on emotional restraint so as not to disrupt the group.
The sources had great examples. Japan's wa, or harmony, Spain's siesta, India's yoga, and Ayurveda.
All reflect those deeper cultural values and approaches. Japan's wa emphasizes harmonious relationships as stress management. The siesta prioritizes rest. Yoga and Ayurveda are about holistic well-being.
Interesting.
And you also see differences in types of coping. Some East Asian cultures might lean more towards avoidance coping to keep social harmony versus maybe more direct problem solving in some Western cultures.
And it makes sense that strategies aligning with your culture would probably work better for you.
That's a critical point. Research backs that up. Culturally congruent coping strategies are more effective at reducing distress.
So if there's a mismatch,
It can actually add stress or feelings of not fitting in.
which just highlights how important culturally sensitive mental health support is.
Absolutely. A generic approach just doesn't work. Programs need to respect and incorporate those cultural values and preferred ways of coping.
Okay, let's shift to biology. It's not just thoughts and feelings. Our bodies react physically. We hear about fight or flight.
Yes, there's a deep biological basis. The SAM, axis sympathetic adrenomedullary, that's the rapid fight or flight.
The immediate alarm system.
Right. Adrenaline, noradrenaline, preparing you for action right now.
And then there's the HPA axis. That's slower.
Precisely. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, that's for more prolonged stress. It releases cortisol.
Ah, cortisol.
Yeah, helps regulate energy, suppresses the immune system short term, but chronic activation isn't good long term.
And the brain's obviously central. The amygdala as the threat detector, and the prefrontal cortex trying to manage the reaction.
Exactly. Amygdala spots potential threats quickly. Prefrontal cortex, higher thinking, decision-making, tries to regulate the emotional response.
Okay.
And interestingly, actively coping seems linked to brain areas involved in reward and cognitive control. Taking action can feel inherently good neurochemically.
And this idea of neuroplasticity, our behaviors can actually change our brain. So practicing healthy coping can, rewire our stress response.
Absolutely. Chronic stress can change brain structures, but adaptive coping, like mindfulness or CBT, can promote neurogenesis, new brain cell growth, and strengthen connections in those regulatory areas.
Wow.
It's like building better pathways for handling stress.
Even social support has a biological link. Oxytocin and things like that.
That's right. Social support activates reward circuits, reduces amygdala activity. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, is key there. It really shows the biological benefit of connection during stress.
And our bodies are involved too, not just our brains, like exercise or even crying.
Totally. The mind-body connection is crucial. Relaxation techniques, exercise, they activate the parasympathetic system, the rest and digest system, release endorphins.
Makes sense.
Even crying can be a physical release of emotional tension, helping the body rebalance after stress.
So we've talked learning, biology.
Well,
What about genetics? Is resilience partly inherited? How we tend to cope?
yes, research suggests there is a genetic influence on resilience, but, and this is really important, it's not deterministic.
Meaning genes aren't destiny.
Exactly. Certain genes might influence our susceptibility to stress or our kind of baseline capacity to bounce back. They influence tendencies.
Any examples of these genes?
Sure. Genes related to that HPA axis, like CRHR1, FKBP5, influence how we handle stress hormones.
Okay.
Others related to neurotransmitters, like neuropeptide Y, COMT, the serotonin transporter gene, 5-HT-TLPR affect mood and stress reaction. Even BDNF, for brain cell growth, is linked to resilience.
So they influence the underlying system.
Yes, pretty much. The hardware and software involved in our stress response and recovery.
But it's not just the genes, right? You mentioned experiences matter too. Epigenetics.
Exactly. Gene-environment interaction is absolutely key. Our genes interact with our life experiences.
How does that work?
Well, epigenetics is fascinating. Life experiences can cause chemical changes around the genes, affecting whether they're turned on or off.
Without changing the DNA sequence itself.
Right. And these epigenetic changes can have lasting effects on our resilience. It shows how our experiences can biologically shape our stress response over time.
Which sounds like it could lead to more personalized ways to help people build resilience someday.
That's definitely a potential future direction. Identifying vulnerabilities, tailoring interventions based on biological profiles. It could make support much more effective.
This whole discussion, it makes me think bigger picture. Philosophers have grappled with suffering for millennia. How does that connect to coping and resilience?
Oh, hugely. Philosophical traditions offer really profound insights. Eastern philosophies like Buddhism or Hinduism often see suffering as inherent, maybe even a path to understanding.
Right. Acceptance is a big theme there.
Yes. And then in the West, you have existentialism, Kierkegaard, Sartre seeing suffering tied to meaninglessness, but also freedom and growth potential.
Yeah. And the Stoics and Epicureans focused on minimizing suffering, though in different ways.
Precisely. Stoicism through virtue and reason, Epicureanism through tranquility, simple pleasures, avoiding pain. And Nietzsche famously argued that adversity is actually necessary for growth and strength.
Wow, so many perspectives.
Okay.
And Viktor Frankl's idea about finding meaning in suffering seems so relevant to resilience.
Incredibly relevant. Frankl's logotherapy, finding meaning even in horrific circumstances, is a cornerstone of resilience for many. And that philosophical idea of acceptance, acknowledging reality without necessarily liking it, is also a key part of many effective coping strategies.
Now, thinking about how we cope, it's not always positive or healthy, is it? sometimes coping can be harmful. That raises ethical questions.
That's a really important distinction, adaptive versus maladaptive coping. Adaptive strategies help us promote well-being. Maladaptive ones cause harm long-term to ourselves or others.
You brought up extreme examples, asking about harmful actions towards others. That seems like a breakdown of adaptive coping.
Absolutely. Extreme harmful behaviors represent a failure of healthy coping and a major departure from ethical pro-social responses. Empathy and a sense of responsibility are vital for ethical coping.
And there's that concept of moral resilience for people in tough professions, like healthcare, coping with ethical stress.
Exactly. Moral resilience is crucial for them navigating ethical dilemmas while maintaining integrity. And self-care becomes an ethical imperative in those roles to ensure they can keep providing good care.
Okay, we've covered so much ground. Let's circle back to resilience itself is clearly more than just bouncing back, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. Resilience is better defined as successfully adapting to challenging experiences. It includes bouncing back, yes, but also potentially post-traumatic growth.
Growth.
Yeah, positive psychological change resulting from struggling with adversity. And crucially, resilience isn't fixed. It's a dynamic process you can develop.
And lots of things contribute. Optimism, support, skills.
Absolutely. Optimism, social support, coping strategies, emotional regulation, problem solving, self-esteem, purpose, feeling in control, emotional intelligence, a growth mindset. They're all key ingredients.
You also asked specifically about resilience in age. Do we get more resilient as we get older?
That's a fascinating area. There's some good evidence suggesting psychological resilience might actually increase with age. It's sometimes called the paradox of aging.
Paradox.
Yeah, older adults often report higher well-being despite maybe facing more health issues or losses. It could be life experience, more mature coping skills, shifting priorities.
Interesting. So while the methods might change, the capacity might grow.
It seems that way, yes. The underlying resilience seems strong, potentially even increasing.
So bringing AI back in one last time.
Mm.
How could it actually help us understand and build our own coping strengths?
Well, the potential is pretty significant. Early detection of issues, virtual therapy tools, personalized support plans. AI could analyze huge amounts of data.
So it might spot patterns in our behavior or language that suggest we're struggling.
Exactly. Analyze data for subtle indicators. AI chatbots or virtual assistants could also offer ongoing support, guide basic exercises.
And personalization seems key. AI looking at my history, my responses, maybe even genetics to suggest strategies.
Precisely. Tailoring plans based on individual data, tracking progress, adjusting, and looking at population data, AI might uncover hidden patterns about what works for whom, feeding back into that coping strings idea.
So potentially real-time support through apps and things.
That's the exciting potential, yes. Personalized, real-time coping suggestions. But, and it's a big but, we always have to consider the ethics, data privacy, and making sure AI complements, not replaces, human connection and mental health.
That leads perfectly to another really insightful question you raised. If coping skills are so vital, why aren't they taught more routinely? In schools, maybe?
It's a very valid and important question. While we pick some things up, these skills are learned and absolutely can be taught explicitly. Systematically.
So we could build it into schools, parenting programs, workplace wellness?
Absolutely. A comprehensive approach would teach the different types of coping, problem-focused, emotion-focused, meaning-focused, social support.
And the difference between healthy and unhealthy coping.
Crucial. Distinguishing adaptive from maladaptive strategies and actively building emotional resilience from a young age.
It feels like empowering people with that knowledge could shift things, make us more proactive about stress, maybe reduce stigma.
Precisely. Education empowers proactive well-being. Explicitly teaching and encouraging healthy coping strings can foster a more resilient, mentally healthy society overall. It helps destigmatize seeking help too.
Well, this has been a truly deep dive into this whole fascinating world of coping strings. We've seen how it touches on, well, almost everything about being human.
Yeah, our biology, our beliefs, history, culture, even future tech like AI.
It's clear that understanding these ideas coping, resilience isn't just about surviving challenges.
No, it's about equipping ourselves to really thrive, even when things are tough.
So for you, our listener, we leave you with this thought. Maybe take a moment to reflect on your own coping strings. Which ones do you rely on?
Which ones might you want to consciously cultivate or strengthen?
And how do your own unique background, your culture, your personal history, shape how you navigate life's ups and downs?
It's definitely an ongoing journey of self-discovery.
Absolutely. We hope this deep dive has given you some valuable new perspectives to consider along the way.
This is DigitView,